Hi. Okay, got it. Hi, Kiki. Hi, everybody. Hi,
How is
Chloe.
everybody?
We're fine. And we're live, apparently.
Oh, for real?
Yes, because we just got the
Hi,
notification.
How is everybody?
We're
good.
fine. And we're live, apparently.
Oh, for real?
Yes, because we just got the notification. I think that. Give me a second. Let me.
good.
And we're live, apparently.
Oh, for real?
Yes, because we just got the. Okay. So I'm trying to wait, is that echo still happening? Because why not it felt like I was in the twilight zone?
I think we're
Can we hear it?
I'm hearing you
Okay,
and your
I
mouth
think
is moving in sync. So I think we're good now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi everybody. Let me just quickly make a tweet so that those that are unaware that we've gone live can join us. So give me a second. Let me copy this. Okay, so I have put up the tweet and there we go. So hello everybody. Hi, thank you for joining us. I have with me Chloe and Kiki, who are the co-hosts, right? We're all co-hosts of this.
Guys, I just went behind to try and get rid of that huge glare there, but it didn't work. That's all right. I'm not the host. I'll just use my hair to block it. No, I'm kidding. It's fine.
We love the multi-function nature of our hair. You know, you can be like,
I'm telling you, if I had the fro, I would have actually just shifted, but unfortunately I pinned it up today. I wasn't prepared.
We love it though. So hello everybody. For those that are watching us, we're back with our last book pick for the year, which is
Skin of the Sea.
So I remember in January, was it January? Was it January? It was January. It was end of last year into January when we're aligning on what books we wanted to read for the year. And then it got to my bit and I was like, oh, I would pick a book I've always wanted to read since I first heard of it. Because I think that I was the one that actually put in Jerry on about the book, because I know how much he loves black mermaids and just water creatures, black water creatures. And I remember because I did see Natasha Bowen's tweet about the book, and it was I think it was when she was doing a cover reveal. And I was just the first thing I looked was that cover is stunning. And then the second thing I looked at was the synopsis, and I was like, yo, pretty cover, great synopsis. I need this book. And then I added in Jerry. I was like, Jerry, do you want this? And she said, yes. I'm like, cool. And that was about it. I ended up getting the book. Okay, so we're going to get into that with the next set of questions because I do have questions. I'm hoping that this can be a fairly interactive session. So I don't know, Kiki, if you could just, because I know my internet is acting weird at my end. Okay. So if you could just help me check the live stream chat so that if anybody asks questions or comments, you can let me know, because I don't know why it's not letting me open it here as well.
Okay, on it.
So I guess we'll dive right in. Because I know I mentioned on Twitter that it's for both those that actually finished the books and those that maybe started it, or maybe you have it on your TBR and you're wondering if you want to actually pick up the book. And I think I'm the only one that actually finished the book, because I know Kiki started. No, I know Chloe started, and I think you mentioned, Kiki, that you're getting it closer to the end of the year because you went to the bookstore and it was all sold out.
Yeah, so I had to put it on hold on Libby, and it's popular. So I think not until end of December maybe is when I might get it. Yeah.
I love that. I love the fact that like it's selling off the rack, off the shelves. I love that people are reaching for it and buying it. There's an author's note that Natasha Bowen puts at the end of the book that talks about how, you know, representation matters and representation in our story matters. And I just love the fact that there are so many people that are like, yo, Black mermaids, and this is something that you know, I'm going to even bring it back. It just occurred to me that there's a question I wanted to ask that I did not like actually put down, but now that I've connected the dots, I'm like, cool, because this can be more general, not really connected to the story question. So I have that in my head. But I just love the fact that, you know, she mentioned the fact that the representation is very important. And so she figures that she's going to do her part in making sure that, you know, Blackness, especially Black fantasy, especially Black mermaids, are represented in our work. And I think she actually did a pretty good job with the book. So,
good.
You know,
I wasn't sure. Maybe I'll get it on Kindle then.
I do have some questions.
Let's see. That's why. I was like, let me wait because your girl is poor. So like if I can just wait for the library copy and not, you know, but like let's see how it goes at the end of the.
I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. Hi, Claire.
Everyone, sorry I'm late. I might need to leave a bit early, but I just wanted to join. And
no problem.
Thank you. We just wanted to establish, because I have finished it. Chloe has only read like the first chapter.
Now the author's note. I just skimmed it because you mentioned it.
Yeah.
I read it, but about a month ago. So it's
you're ahead of the pack. Trust me.
I thought book plug was gonna be last month. I don't know what I was doing. I like the Saturday, I'm like ready to like, and then I was like, well, there's nothing going on. Let me check, and then very embarrassing. Don't know why I'm telling you all right now.
Well, you know, I'm not actually surprised, because today I woke up and I thought it was like 3 hours earlier. So I'm panicking and I'm sending Jerry the message. I'm like, Jerry, when is it? What time is it? Because my brain was like, yo, what if it's like way earlier than you had planned and you missed it? And everyone's like, we're waiting for Noria. She's meant to like, you know, lead us in this book club discussion. And it's just cricket sound because Noria is like, I have time. It's not enough time. So I feel you on that. So we'll just go straight into it, because I do know that the people have plans, and also like it's already like 7:13 p.m. my time. So I know that my neighbors will be looking at me like, bitch, we know it's Saturday, but at the same time, what are you doing? Why are you screaming in the middle of the night?
We're not quite to middle yet, man. So they're okay.
Okay, so I guess we'll start off with first impressions, and because I know that not everybody read it or has finished reading it, and I think we started talking about this story before everybody else joined, and before we went on live. But like, what were your first impression of like the first chapter, and how did you feel with regards the way in which Natasha Bowen set up the characters, set up the story? Was she able to draw you in? I had a colleague I have a friend who like goes to bookshops, but before he buys the book, like he will read the first chapter, like the first 2 pages, and be like, okay, this sounds cool. And by like, he won't read the synopsis, he will just read like the first 2 pages. So if the author is able to establish the story, establish the character, establish the world in like the first chapter, it's not picking up that book. Even no matter how you'd be like, oh, it gets better, you know, like it's the start. Like, nah, you have to capture like my attention like that. So I was just wondering, Chloe, did you think that Natasha did that in like the first chapter of the book?
I mean, I thought so. I thought it was pretty interesting because we just open up with Simi like swimming under this ship, the slave ship, and like there's sharks and stuff, and there's a person who actually gets thrown in. She has to like retrieve their soul. And I was pretty intrigued by everything. It was interesting reading that just like after reading like The Deep by River Solomon, because sharks were also kind of very minor in there, but like the relationship with the sharks was like kind of like friendly in The Deep more so. And I was kind of wondering like, oh, like are these going to be like kind of a issue later on? Like she can kind of tell the sharks what to do, but like it seems like her power over them is kind of limited. So I was interested like what her relationship like the other sea creatures are going to be on this journey.
I did think that, and thankfully we'll get to that later after Claire is able to share her thoughts on the book. But she does, like, there is that callback to that ability, and I can give like further illumination on how that power works and why she has that ability. So Claire, what were your impressions of the book as a whole?
As a whole, I think just in terms of like that ability, it comes back in a really interesting way. And it's really perceptive of you to pick up on like the limitations of it, of like kind of like, does a shark really want to be controlled, or like is there like some resistance to what's going on? So that was like very perceptive of you. So I hope you get a chance to read the rest so you can catch how that comes back. I thought the book as a whole was like, it was a nice, easy read. I love the mermaid theme. I really love Sirène, which is like a Vodun Loa. And so kind of like that for me, that connection was like, it's always been kind of like holds a special place for me. I wasn't as thrilled about the setup of the romance in the book. There was ways that the dynamic just felt, I don't know, there was something something off about it that I can't quite put my finger on, but maybe we'll talk about it more and I'll be like, oh, okay, that's why I was like, no, I'm not into this. But I love the story, and that it was a bit of an easier read. It was just kind of like flowing, but also just like very rich in and like from the naive place that I am, like it was just so much about the gods and about kind of like their dynamics and all of their history with each other. And it was really interesting to have a story that was that had that in the forefront so much.
Could I say something here though? So I have a first impression of the book, even though I haven't even looked at it. And the first impression I got was on Twitter from a mutual. And I'll just leave the identity at that. But why I was so eager to be at today's club meeting, was excited when you chose it, is because that person did a kind of live reading, like a live reaction thread on Twitter. And they were just down on the whole book from start to finish. All I'm gonna say is that they don't look like any of us anyway, but they live in the Americas, and they do live in the global South. And I don't know if they are perhaps a practitioner or a follower, because I haven't read the book, but it seems as if they are probably a practitioner of like one of the diaspora spiritualities, right? And she was just tearing the book apart. And I was like, and it doesn't match this, and it doesn't match that, and it's inaccurate, and it da-da-da-da-da. And I thought, well, first of all, speaking as someone in Jamaica who has we have OBO, and there are differing positions towards how we deal with, I guess, what we call outsiders and OBN, and but some folks would say, well, you shouldn't be writing about it accurately in a fantasy book. First of all, you have some who'd be like, don't even address it at all. But there'd be others, and I think Eden Royce had this position when she wrote about root magic in Root Magic, which is that she changed something. So there was like maybe enough for someone who you know, to kind of gesture toward it, but she actually didn't put out like completely accurate like recipes and like details and information. Because that's not something, you're not doing that for the entertainment. Like this is a protected space and work and information that you're not just gonna like put out there as part of your fiction, which made sense to me. So like when she was like, this is inaccurate, it's inaccurate, I'm like, well, it's not a spiritual manual or like book.
Yeah.
Like it's of course it's gonna be inaccurate. I guess maybe she changed things, I suppose. And I can understand why maybe based on the critiques I saw elsewhere, maybe some of the changes came from a place that wasn't in the spirit of what should have been done. And I can completely understand that. But this attitude I find sometimes, I mean, and she is of Nigerian descent, is the writer not?
Yes, Natasha Bowen
Right.
is of Nigerian descent. Yeah.
Right, which doesn't mean like stamp of approval, boom, boom, bam, like you can do whatever. But I think it does, like, I think we need to understand that, like, this is her culture too. And folks have different relationships to their culture and heritage. And and your relationship to it might not be the same as theirs. So like, I understand if this is like your faith or your spirituality and like you have a particular feeling about how that should be treated. But that may not be how someone else feels, and they don't have to feel that way. Like they genuinely don't have to, because I think sometimes we think because I understand the history, I understand why we're more protective. It's not this, we're not in the position of power, of dominance in the way Christianity is. But sometimes these attitudes remind me of the way Christians go, you can't write about that because that's wrong and you're evil and you're blasphemous if you put Jesus like, and to me, it's honestly like, I can't tell the difference sometimes, you know, where I feel like you need to understand that there are lots of different people in this space with lots of different relationships to the same thing that you share. And what might seem like disrespect to you, isn't for them. They're being creative, and they're being generative, you know. And I know the line isn't easy, but sometimes I just feel like as folks that are a part of the same group in different spaces, we could come at it with a bit more love and grace and recognize the forces that might have severed folks from what they're engaging with. And so that when they do, because it's still continuing now, because migration is not always done for great voluntary reasons. Like people sometimes want to be able to stay home and can't, even now. I don't know, like, let's just not all the time.
Yeah.
Like, so that was like my impression of the book. So when you chose that, I was like, damn, let me hear what Noria said. No. You know, from like someone who's actually Nigerian. Anyway, let's continue.
I think that is great, actually. And it's a perfect segue because one of the questions I'd written here was, what do you think of writers who incorporate mythology or spirituality into their stories? Should the purity of those myths be maintained, or are they molded, or should they be molded to fit the story being told? Which is perfect, because I was like, yo, he has started us off on this conversation. And I love it.
Okay. Go me, who hasn't read the book. I have nothing more to add because I haven't read it, but you know, did my part.
Thank you. Also, Chloe, like this, you don't need to necessarily reference the book, because this is more of like a general theme. And the reason why I was thinking of it was actually because of what you said, Kiki. Because when I first started reading the book, I was like, yo, there's some inaccuracies. Why is Jemoja in the sea? Why is she the one creating the mermaids? Sure, you know, she is the mother, right? But Olokun is the god of the deep, the god of the sea, who also is androgynous, kind of like Obatala, so he can switch like genders. So sometimes, you know, male, sometimes females. And I'm also like, sure, I grew up in Ibadan, but I'm also Edo, right? And in Benin, because there's a connection between Benin and Ile-Ife, right? With regards to the fact that one of the princes was the one sent to Benin to found the city. But Olokun is also a god that we recognize. So this is somebody that is recognized across 2 different tribes and 2 different religions and everything else, and religious beliefs and mythologies. And all I was just thinking is that, like, why is it Yemoja? Like, mother of fishes, yes, but mermaids are not just like them. And that's another thing. Because I was like, the mummy water that I know, that, you know, Nigerians grew up hearing the tale of, like, oh, don't stray near bodies of water. I had all these plans for things I wanted to do about, like, unknown facts you don't know about the mummy water. And I was able to do because first I was injured first I was ill, then I got injured, and I'm like, I'm so accident prone.
You need to stop
like,
this,
oh my
Noria.
God.
Like, what on earth? When I saw her, like, I got more medicine because I was like, how are we ending 2022, ma'am? Anyway.
I honestly don't know. Everybody in my office is like, yo, you fractured your finger earlier this year, then you had like food poisoning, and then you had this, and then you had that, and now you're like hurt your knee. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But you know, part of the things that like the mummy water, when we hear stories of the mummy water, especially if you're Nigerian, and that was the first thing I tracked because I was wondering if she was going to address it. But then it occurred to me that if you're not Nigerian and if you're not aware of this culture and these stories, you might not understand it, that the mummy water does have very colorist undertones. So what do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? The more fair-skinned you are, the more likely people would address you as the mummy water spirit, because the
That's true in Haiti too.
The belief, right? Because the belief is that, oh, blindingly beautiful, that's who they are, and blindingly beautiful for them is fairness because color is undertones. And then there's a second layer to it. If you live in a riverine area, so think the riverine areas of, say, Port Harcourt, Rivers State, you know, parts of Oyo, parts of Delta, parts of Edo State, right? Then your mummy water increases because they are very already close to bodies of water. If you're fair-skinned and are from a riverine area, like, no way, when you're growing up, you're going to be called mummy water for sure, because they're like, you're blindingly beautiful and fair, and you're also from this area where there are like lots of natural bodies. So yeah, we know, we suspect. I had a cousin growing up. She's passed now, Regina, but I had a cousin who was very light skinned, also from Edo State, and that was like what they called her all throughout when I was growing up. That was a nickname, even within the family. Like, you had family members calling her mummy water and everything else. So I was wondering if it was going to be brought up, if Natasha Bowen was going to explore that, but she never did, which I was like, if you're telling the story of mummy water, like, tell the story of mummy water. Don't just, and everything else. It's not just the mermaid story. And also because the way in which Nigerians tell it, like, sometimes they don't have fins, sometimes they are not, you know, half fish, half beautiful woman. Sometimes they are just spirits that reside in water, you know. So like the mummy water is a very broad term. And the reason why I keep saying Nigeria is because in Natasha Bowen's story, it was clear that she was situating it within the country. So, which is the reason why when you were mentioning the fact that, your mutual on Twitter was all like, oh my God, it's not like this and everything else. And, you clarify that this person is not like clearly not Nigerian. So, which is why I would take what they're also saying with several pinches of salt, no offense to your mutual, but there are certain things that they will not get. And there are certain tweaks, even the way in which we spell like the names of the Orisha is different. The way we pronounce the Orisha, oh God.
Yes, I actually had someone, even the spelling of the term Orisha. Like I have a friend who hates to see it with the H, and she told me, and I was like, no problem. I take out the H, and she was so grateful. She was like, thank you.
Lose the H. Orisha is O-R-I-S-A, and then you put a mark. Why you're because see, in Yoruba language, the letter S, right, it can either be pronounced as C, as in Simi, or She, as in Shade. The difference between the C and the She sound is the fact that they are both S's, but the She sound has a mark, an intonation mark at the bottom of it. So when you see that, you know that, oh, this is a She sound. Which is it is so, I was just like, what is this? Okay, sorry.
It's okay, girl. This is the time to let it out. That's what we're here for.
We're going to get to that part. Yeah, sorry, Claire. Please continue.
No, finish what you were saying.
No. I was about to say that we're going to get to that part, but I want to like take us back to I want us to like come back to the main topic as well, or rather the first question, which is what are our thoughts about mythology and spirituality in books, and how do we feel about writers either modifying it to suit the story, or do we insist that they must maintain the purity of those mythologies and those religions in text? So that was what I was about to say. But Claire, you were about to say something, so we can address that and then go to the question.
I think like so fast that you in the book you realize that she's not trying to keep anything pure or like reflective of like any, like it's like almost like, oh, okay, this isn't about like telling the actual stories. And so like it feels much more like American Gods, like Neil Gaiman. Like it's just kind of like
yes,
alluding like inspired by like these types of like characters and so forth, and then also the positioning of like the perspective of being like a mermaid and being like being born of and I read the book a while ago, but like born of this one Eurisha, and then their dynamics between each other in the context of the transatlantic slave trade, and like why aren't they dealing with this, and I think that that's not necessarily like a story that you would find like, I don't know how, I guess like, yeah, it felt very much like fiction, like just a light, fun, kind of young adult, fictional interpretation. And perhaps one of the issues too is that like when I think about it now, listening to you, is very much an Americanized story structure. Like, so everything is set in Nigeria, but in terms of like the romance, like there's ways that like the content and the specifics are Nigerian, but the way that the story is set up feels very much like I've read this kind of structure, like the hero's narrative, like it's just very cookie cutter young adult fiction. And I think that was part of the reason that I was like, I couldn't care less about whether it's being pure or not, because it's not trying to in any way.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point. I think that dovetails into what it would have been my general response. I mean, I always start with like, what does it seem to be the intentions of the writer with the book? And really try to suss it out on that level first, rather than, as best as I can, rather than carrying in too much of a preconceived idea of what it ought to be. Sometimes that can be hard. Sometimes I don't even know what preconceived ideas I have in the first place to even to suss it out. But I guess I always try to give the benefit of the doubt. Now, this doesn't mean you get, carte blanche to do whatever. And I think sometimes I guess how I judge it on a case by case basis is like what spirit does it hold? So even if it's not matching things perfectly, is it perfectly as if that's possible? And then also, to me, the idea of a pure kind of myth or mythology or spirituality doesn't even exist. It's false and it's toxic and it's colonial. So I wouldn't like culture, like everything changes, nothing is static. And the different ways that changes, I think, especially when you see, I guess for me, I think what it is for, and I'm going to speak like more specifically as a Jamaican person, as a Black Caribbean person, is that we have writers coming from and using stories and cultures that were not for the marketplace, were not necessarily prioritized like for the marketplace, were not fiction, and are not used to being sort of out in the world in that fashion. So in the way that even, again, I'll just use an easy example of Christianity, where even though it's still a living culture, like, and it still has, wide adherence across the globe, it's more used to being, I guess, commercialized and put into all kinds of different narratives and taken and done all kind of things to it. And it's so dominant usually where it is anyway, that they don't even really care. Not really, except as a way to, they don't even really care. Whereas for us, I think we're way more sensitive about it because, of course, it's going out into a system that is not for us, and we tend to suffer from it and not to benefit from it anyway, even when it goes out into that space. So I think rather than coming up with a one-no answer, I would just say, like, I think we're having like evolving attitudes. Like, I think we're working it out. Like, as writers, because there are more Black SFF writers from across the world writing in this genre, putting their books out. And I think that's where the experimentation is going to come from, because these are the cultures that they're pulling from. These are the myths, these are the faith, these are the spiritualities. And they are going to want to use them in the way they see other writers from different spaces getting to use theirs for their stories. I've seen like similar conversations by Indigenous writers too, right? So I think like as more of it happens, we're going to be dealing with this question more of what it ought to look like, because like for them, or for us, this is our, it's the Greek gods, it's the da-da-da-da-da. Why can't we use that in story? And then you have folks going, no, that's wrong, you can't change, it's just about, so I feel like that's something, I don't know, we're all just gonna have to process and work out and see like what works best for us, I suppose, as opposed to trying to either copy a standard or pretend perhaps that there is even a standard.
I think interestingly enough, like my take on it is quite similar to yours, because like when I first started, I was like, "Yo, Noria, you're a fucking hypocrite." I was like, "Yo, you're a fucking hypocrite," because you see, I'm like, do with Christianity whatever you want. Like, I love Lucifer. I love Neil Gaiman's Lucifer in the comics. I love the Lucifer show, even though it has absolutely Nothing to do with like, Christianity's Lucifer and the depiction of God and Michael and the angels. And I'm like, I don't care.
And when you watch anime, like they do whatever with it. Like they do whatever, with
with
Christianity.
it. And I'm like, give me everything. I love it, and everything else. I'm like reading stuff on Greek mythology and then like reading stories and books inspired by it. And I'm like, do with it whatever you want. I don't care. This is great. And then they come to the Yoruba pantheon and I'm like, how dare you? My brain. I was so torn because one part of my brain was like, how dare you? And then the second part of my brain was like, you hypocrite. Like, why is it that you're okay with, like, because it's like, why is it that you're okay with like that liberty being taken with other religions? And like, then it comes to this and you're so protective. And I think you captured it well because,
there's a reason.
It's like one of them is the dominant one. And I think that that's another thing because what a lot of people do not understand about dominant mythology and religion is that because they're such a dominating force, everybody knows the actual truth about those things. You can see everything else, not actual truth, but like how it is in the text that they are referencing. So you can say whatever you want and everything else, but like people can still refer back to the Bible and the many, many millions, and there's billions variations of it.
And there's like 500 church on one street that you can just step into. And
like you can step into, and that clarity, that reinforcing of, this is actually how it is. Oh no, it's just a book and all of that. It's just a book or a movie and all of that. And the same thing with like Greek mythology or Nordic mythology. You have books that have been written, like, it's there. It's there. But when you then come to the Yoruba pantheon and a religion in itself that is demonized even in Nigeria, right? Like I have been in a bus and seen people uncomfortable with like people worship like the Yoruba pantheon gods, like just them saying something and everybody shifting because colonialism meant that there was a demonization of our religion. And there's also the fact that it's not as if we have so many written accounts of this gods, of this pantheon. And so what it means is that when you have a writer who decides to take like liberties and be like, okay, let me try and take bits of this and use this and make it like this and use it like this to further my story. What it means is that there's not enough of people who actually know the true mythology that they can be like, because eventually what then happens is that when there's all this adaptation and switches and tweaks, people then take those tweaks as the actual truth. So for example, in this story, she's made Ishulalu, that's Ishu, the trickster god, the god of crossroads. She's made him the villain in the story, which I don't know if she understands the significance of making Ishu the villain in the story. Because see, when the colonialists came, kind of like and Christianity, kind of like what they did with Hades, there is no representation of Onwapadi, like Nigerian Christians would say Onwapadi, that's hellfire. There's no depiction of hellfire the way in which is described in Christianity in like Yoruba mythology. And so by extension, there is no representation of the devil in Yoruba mythology. So what they did was take Ishu, a god who is not evil. He's a trickster god. So think Loki. He plays tricks, he plays games, but he's also going to be the one to help the lost. He's also going to be the one to help you make decisions. Because the reason why he stands at crossroads is like, do you really want this? Is that what you want? Are you sure? Okay, then, take it then. Take it then and live with those decisions. Live with that choice. Think about that choice. So and I feel a connection to him because I actually love the essence of who he is. And they took a god like that and said, we'll make him representation of the devil. They'll make him evil. And so The devil in Christianity, when you pick the Yoruba translated Bible, is called Eshu. But in Yoruba pantheon, it's not evil, it's not the devil. And I'm just like, you have so many people who would read this book and then that would be their perception of the God, which is interesting. I'm so sad. Like, it's sad for me, which was why I was like, I was, for the longest time, I had that thought, like battling in my head. So, how do you move and like encourage and want people to tell diverse stories about different mythologies, and at the same time, you're hesitant about this? And I guess for me, I don't mind writers tweaking to suit their plots, to suit the stories they're telling. What I mind, or what I would rather they consider when they're doing this, is maintain the spirit of it. You can play with it. You can do anything with it. It's fiction. You're allowed to. You're telling a story, but maintain the spirit. So if you're going to tap into the Yoruba pantheon and say you're going to pick from the gods, maintain the spirit of it. And it takes a lot of research. Because remember, like I said, there are not as much material out there about the Yoruba pantheon. It's not just a simple Google search. It's the same problem I had with
search results are sketchy too. Like when it comes to that kind of stuff, I don't know. I don't know what to trust online. I usually read all of it with skepticism because it's sketchy. Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh God.
It's only good for like food or clothes, honestly. Anything beyond that,
right? Sketchy. And that's the thing. Because I'm reading this and I'm like, did Natasha, which is the same thing I had with Tomi Adeyemi, only for me to find out that yes, our research involved traveling to Brazil. And I'm like, you examined Santeria and lied to us, Nigeria. Because I'm like, anybody that knows anything will be like, girl, what are you writing?
Yeah.
But also, I'm reading this.
Research for me is, research is great. Fine. But there's something that I think Daniel Jose Older said, and he was pulling from Toni Morrison, who also said it in a different way. But it's, you see, if your frame of reference, or if your mind is still working according to within a particular paradigm, everything that you research is just gonna feed into that particular paradigm. Like research is not like the I looked it up and read it, so I'm ready. For them both, it was like the issue is power and who you're writing for as community. So you have to look at like the power dynamics of you, the person writing about it, and the power dynamics that the narrative will be put out into the world. And like that's kind of what you have to think about first. And that's more the key than research,
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, because like when I say even research, I don't even just mean the books, right? I like what I was like, did Natasha Bowen travel to Nigeria? She wrote a lot about Ile-Ife. Has she ever visited Ile-Ife? Has she spoken to any of the Babalawos? Did she speak to somebody practicing Ifa who specifically worships Yemoja? Yemoja's festival happens in October every year, right? And it's different from the Oshun festival because she's a different goddess of Oshun. Like, did she speak to a Yemoja priestess to actually, and that's another thing, because I think that, like you mentioned, it involves a shift, a paradigm shift. There's a way in which you've been thinking, you've been conditioned. And of course, nobody's saying that we're going to wipe your memories and like take it out of your brain, but being present with the people, with the practitioners, and being present with them for a while. It's not just, you go for a 2-day visit and then you leave. No, you sit, and that's the thing. Like, people who practice Ifa are so open and kind and willing to teach and willing to speak, because it's beautiful and they know that not so many people get it. And if you're telling them that, I have a story I want to tell and I want to get it right, And because it's a very close-knit community, so you have the person who is worshiping Shango, who very well will know the person who is serving Oya, who would know the person that is the priestess for Yamoja. Like it's a small community, and so they know each other and they're interconnected. And you would have all of them come together to tell you stories, so that by the time you're done, like your entire concept of the world and how it all plays out shifts and changes. And I just think that like it's an opportunity that, I guess for me, I wonder if like the question is, oh, they're not willing to, like, that's a lot of effort.
They might not even have the resources, but I would say, I think, is it based in the UK? I
think they should. I think
She was also
I
Welsh.
just read it. She's a teacher in the
Right?
UK. This is
yes.
She's a teacher in the UK.
Right. Yeah, I think I was gonna say, I don't know. I mean, I feel like there's a huge Nigerian diaspora on that side, so that even if she couldn't travel to Nigeria,
she would still have been
I
able
can
to
understand the barriers to that kind of thing. Like it's I feel like it's tricky for diaspora writers, I imagine, because you want to be able to write the way of persons from other spaces get to write about their cultures, but you're also in a group where it's harder for you to access that community sometimes in different ways that would maybe put you in the best position, but you still want to do it. And I think sometimes that can work out, and then sometimes I think it's clear that there's more work to be done. That's what I consider, because I'm thinking about Sui, and I subscribe to his newsletter, and this is kind of like not necessarily related in terms of topic, but just in terms of the barriers to writers, even when they get great opportunities. He was in a position where he got a great opportunity, did not have the funds to access it. And so he sold his first book maybe a bit earlier than he should have. Like he's like, it probably needed more work, but it was like, I need the money. So he sold it so that he could go and get the MFA and make that next step. So I do think sometimes there are things that we as readers might not think of that could be a barrier to why persons don't access it. But then at the same time, I do think writers also have to be conscious that if you don't take particular care on some level, it's going to show up in the work and persons are going to see it. And I found like that critique that you made, like that last one was like the one I found most compelling, because to me, like I said in the chat, like it seemed to operate according to a kind of colonial logic. So it's like you can make changes, but what kind of change?
Yeah. And you know, it's very funny because what you just said then like it segues to a question I had, which is, and I think I can't remember, I think for one of was it for last year? I'm trying to remember, but like I think that there was a period when we were on a panel together, Kiki, talking about like diaspora writers. It was FireCon, right?
I think if we were together, I've never done any other panel. So there's no confusion for me. Like it was FireCon.
I think it was FireCon, and we're there with Sajid, and we're talking about, you know, diaspora writers and writing stories of the continent, of like countries where, you know, they've not, like, you know, we'll say, okay, yes, sure, maybe they've only been to visit like once or twice, or even maybe they've never been, but their grandparents are from here. And, you know, that's all belief. And it's not even a belief, because they are right. It is like, there's this desire to be connected to culture, especially when you're so separate from it, for with no choice. Like it's not your choice. You're the one that made that decision. It might be because of like, the history. Maybe your parents decided that they needed better opportunities, which is logical because there's been a lot of financial migration from the continent, like in the last, say, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Once again, colonialism, fuck you. But, you know, like, there's so many, like, and of course, there's also the fact that, you know, the slave trade and, like, you know, the uprootment, the uprooting of entire people and families, and just there's that need to connect to who you are and your culture, the culture that you believe, you know, you was left behind. And I guess, like, the question I had was, what responsibility do we think that diaspora authors have in, because we're not saying don't tell stories about, like, you know, the Caribbean, don't tell stories about Africa. You can tell the stories, like, nobody's saying you can't, but, like, here is the responsibility that has been placed on you as a writer who wants to tell that story, because you have to get it right, you know. And that was something I was deliberating, and I was reading this book, and I wanted to ask.
But she put work into this book. Like, I can't imagine, like, a mixed race child growing up in the UK writing this book. She couldn't have written this book without having put work into learning about Nigeria and Yoruba culture and all of this stuff. She didn't get it right. Clearly she didn't get it right. But I can't, and it's her first book too. So there's a part of me, like, once I saw a debut novel, I was like, okay, like, I hear, and then also, like, when we think about, like, what we want to see as, like, the vision, the evolution of this space in terms of, like, Black diaspora writers, what's the role of these types of novels don't quite make it, but are very accessible, you know, in some ways. This is the book that somebody's going to read that leads them to the next book and so forth. And then they start to have these more complicated conversations, but they needed that bridge because we all are in this colonial mentality. And Kiki, you hit it on the head. The romance has this kind of very patriarchal feel to it, and it's just feels gross, like, and that's the logic of the story too. Is very colonial, very patriarchal in some ways, and then attempts at like, you know, and so, like, you can feel that it doesn't quite, and so I'm like, yeah, great young adult fun read. It's just like cookie cutter book that's like great. But is there a role for that type of a story, especially for a debut author, to say, like, okay, you figured out how to make something that sells, like, now you need to do the work because you're going to get a big advance on your next book. So you're going to have the capacity.
No, I think it actually has, like, she has a second, like, there's a sequel to it.
Yeah, there's a sequel. It's already out. That's why
it came out September this year.
Yeah, so in response to that, I think I'd say, to sort of modify what Noria said about how like, you have to get it right. I think actually we have to make space, as painful as it may be, because it is, I think, for the fact that when our writers do this kind of stuff, they're actually going to get some of it wrong. And and we hate it. And, you know, it's just like, we got the big, and I think, speaking for someone who's, like, in the Caribbean, to see, like, the writer over there in the first world with the big, you know, the big 5 deal and and getting all this promotion, like, it can be particularly painful for us, because our writers here, who we know and we can see, and we go, look, they're doing it. They can't get the opportunities and the platform, and our local publishers can't give them that to get the kind of access that they do. But so it's painful, but I think, like, as different communities, like, I think we're just gonna have to be comfortable with our writers getting it wrong sometimes, because that's the only way it's gonna progress. It can't be that everybody is, like, hitting it out of the park, debut book, boom, boom, bam, every time, and, like, or even in their third book, or even, like, and not make it like what I saw, which I think is what annoyed me about that thread, that just came off like this really aggressive long screed without kind of any sensitivity to a writer who is of Nigerian descent. Like, it wasn't just like some random old white lady who was trying to, like, put on a wrap and be like, ooh, you know, like, you know, like, it was, she's in the community too. you know, like I understand having critiques, but like show some grace and love because she's in fucking Wales, man.
Mhm.
Like she's at the center. She's at that
Yeah.
empire's center, you know. So.
And how much responsibility do we put on the system? Because like as you're talking, I'm like, this
The
is
editors.
the reason the editors and the publishers who are like, this is the type of book that we want to promote, you know, and it's clear why it is a type of book because they get it completely. It fits with all of their pieces of how a story should go. It fits with like not too complex, but also like, oh, it's got all of this like, you know, the trimmings of Nigeria, right? And so they're like, this for us is very digestible and we're going to push it, you know, whereas like something that's more complex, they're going to be like, ooh, I don't like, you know, the readers are going to find it too hard. They're not
don't understand
like,
it. Love your
enough
work. But we can't today. Yeah.
And I think that like you both do really nail it on the head with regards to that. The only thing I would add to it, and for me, I know I would start by saying that not every author has the power, because that's another thing that I think we sometimes forget, the power certain authors have in publishing. Because like you said, you mentioned Sui now, for example, and you know, having to make that decision. Some authors are just like, I would like to get published. But I think that this is something that some of them, you know, people that should, for example, Tomi Adeyemi, you have a lot of money, you have power, please, you know, if you're watching this video.
Sorry. I told me, where's the movie? Girl, I know it's not your fault. Like Hollywood Posse, like straight up. I swear to God, if we get another Hunger Games movie before the Blood and Bone adaptation, I'm gonna riot. Like I'm tired. I am tired.
I just want to fear death. Like last time, Nadine was like, "Oh,
honey, me not put the hope on that." That got reoptioned. That got reoptioned. So that's like,
oh
God bless us with that one. But I just like, for me, this is a tangent. But the fact that such a blockbuster novel that got such marketing power from publishing, because my friend in German said that when the German edition came out, there were like huge banners on the stores, and like that book got the marketing. I don't know why. Not sure why it was crowned, but that was the one that was crowned as the Black fantasy. And to see a book like that struggle in the Hollywood system to get made, and some little Jing Bang Crow book, I don't even know about the series, good. Every minute them a pop out. I'm just so like,
God.
If there's trouble getting hers to actually move forward, like what is the hope? I don't care how slow Hollywood is, because Hollywood's slower for some than others.
Yo, but like I used to be a conspiracy theorist, and I'm very like, I'm careful with these things these days, but Hollywood is not just about money. Hollywood is very much a tool of maintaining like racist systems, colonial systems.
Yes,
100%.
You know, like the way that they're able to produce so much content and then they sell it to the world at dirt cheap prices. So everybody's TV set is full of American content. That like, to me, that's why Danny Glover was never able to make a movie about the Haitian Revolution. And like all of these movies, like even Wakanda is in the Marvel universe. Like it fits within that Marvel logic of everything.
Yeah.
And I think that it's more than just, it's
definitely more than just money. Agree 100%.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Oh, but I have a question for you, Noria. Have you read
Wait, let me have I read what?
Sorry?
You were about to say something. Because I wanted to say
I was going to ask you a question.
Last point before I forgot.
Go say the last point. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So I was saying that like I know not all the writers have power, but like for the writers who get the choice, I like to use Jennifer Makumbi as a reference point.
Yeah. She wrote different, man.
It took a while for her to publish Chintu. And it took a while because she insisted on having, I think she insisted on, because Shinto is Ugandan, like follows a Ugandan family. She insisted on having a Ugandan editor.
Wow.
Editor
I didn't know about that.
That was the reason why it took so long for that book to get published. Because she was like, nope.
Do you mean in Uganda itself or in the UK and the US?
No, I think it was actually in Uganda.
Ah, okay. Because I know she was
very particular.
Yeah, because I know there was an African publisher who put it out before.
Yes.
So she was insistent then. That's awesome.
She was very insistent because she was like, no, that she needs to get it right. And all I just think is, because I will get to some of the little bits, not the mythology and the big bits, but like the little bits that I think that Natasha could have done better. And this is for any Black SFF author that's currently watching this video. Just even if it is that you have no control over anything else, insist on sensitivity readers or an editor from that actual region, not somebody who says, because there's this publisher will just be like, oh, you're Nigerian? Sure, read the book. But am I a Nigerian that is Yoruba? If I'm not Yoruba, because I'm not Yoruba, for example, am I a Nigerian who speaks Yoruba, which I do? Am I a Nigerian who writes Yoruba, which I do? Am I a Nigerian who reads Yoruba, which I do? Because there's a difference in that. Because when it's somebody who is reading through your work, I can read the language and speak the language and write the language, and it can be like, oh no, Orisha does not have an H. Lose that. This is not how you write Adekola. Lose that. Oh, Ile-Ife has this hyphen. Put that in. Because then they understand that, and then it elevates the story you're telling. It gives you this sense of authenticity, because this person has made sure that, okay, even if it is that every other thing, you're able to play with every other thing, but at least the language, because the thing that I find and also the audiobook, because I'm not sure, Claire, did you read the book physically or did you listen to it on audio?
No, I listened to the audiobook, and when I saw in the chat that you mentioned it, I was like, ooh, because I was in Jerry, I was like, this seems authentic, but I don't know anything.
If there's any Nigerian, anybody that understands Yoruba that is reading this book, please do not pick up the audiobook. I beg of you. I beg, consider this me saving your life, because that audiobook felt like nails on a chalkboard, and they dragged every time. Yesterday, I love Yesterday, right? She was one of my favorite characters. She was one of my favorite actresses from American Gods. I love her. But Yetunde Badaki cannot speak Yoruba. And that was which is the reason why oh God, I can't remember her name. The author that wrote Iron Widow. Right? There's our most recent book, Ziranje Zhao. Our most recent book, something with Zachary Yang. She had released it on audio, and then she had to apologize to everybody because, I think the person, it was meant to be somebody who speaks, I think maybe they got a Japanese speaker to voice a Chinese story or something like that, and the intonation, everything was wrong. And she apologized and told people that they're going to re-put it, they're going to take it down. She's very sorry, because get somebody, if you're going to do an audio production, get somebody that actually speaks the language, because it is terrible if it's somebody that cannot. You cannot be telling me about Ogun and calling him Ogun or Ogun, because Ogun means medicine. Ogun means war. Ogun is the god. And
Lord Jesus!
I swear, Oh my God, Kiki. I was
Oh my
just like,
God. And you know, it's not funny enough because persons with accessibility issues, like if they have that's audiobook is the only thing that can rely on. I mean, that's completely like gibberish at that point, you know?
because you're just like,
Like,
what are you,
that's
what
rough.
is this? Who is this? What
Oh,
God is
boy.
this? Even down to the way she kept calling the name of the protagonist. For the longest time, if you listen to the audiobook, she calls her Simidele, 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 Simidele. So in my head, I'm like, oh, Simidele, Simidele, maybe Yamoja, Simidele. Like that was what I thought her name was. Until we get to the end of the book. When Yamoja talks about, was it Yamoja, was it even her? Was it Simi that now talks about, oh, the meaning of her name, which basically means like, you know, to follow someone home. And I'm like, that is not Simidele. That is Simi. Dele. Simi means to see somebody off, to follow somebody, like follow the person home. So Simi Dele is her name. And for the entirety, all 11 hours of this book, Simi Dele, I was just like,
It's rough. Look here, I stopped listening to audiobook, you know, for Caribbean. I mean, even when just the accents, sometimes the accents just sound like racist caricature at a certain point, and I just can't. Like, whose was it? It was Bitter by Kweke Emezi.
Emezi.
Yeah, and pronounce it again?
Yes, Emezi.
Emezi, yeah, okay.
Kweke Emezi, yes.
Yeah, thanks. And the protagonist is supposed to be from Trinidad and Tobago because it's about the pet's protagonist. It's her mother. So, and I'm listening and I'm like, okay, because I wanted to, I'm getting into audiobooks now. I have my Libby app. I'm going to be having a real nice time. And take care, Claire.
Yeah. Hi, Claire.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
Hi.
And when it wasn't so bad when the narrator was voicing the protagonist, I guess because at that point they were living somewhere else that wasn't Trinidad and Tobago, but when they got to voicing the lines from the protagonist family, I had to share it in stories. I said, folks, please help me identify where this person is from, because it was painful. And it's like, you think about it and it's not, they're supposedly speaking some kind of English. I don't know. So it's not even something as intricate as what you're describing, right? But the accent made me think of minstrelsy, and I just had no other reference for it. It was absolutely horrific. I was like, who is this supposed to be? And I have Trinbagonian followers. And they were like, oh, no, that's not us. That's you. Must be Jamaican. I was like, don't even come with a sound like, don't even, like, it's so fucking disrespectful that I've just stopped. Like, I can't. Like, I was listening to a different short story collection, The Secret Lives of Church Ladies, very popular. And there was one story that featured like a Jamaican nurse or something. And when the narrator slipped into it, I was just like, well, I'm done. I can't, like, I can't do it. I don't have to, so I don't. It's just like, if you're gonna, unless this is somebody who actually lived here and doing it, like, I'm not. Because it feels like a slap in the face every time. And I really don't know how Caribbean folks manage. It
was, I'm just like, I'm relieved that I'm not the only person, but sad that you had to deal with that, because it was just,
trust me, and it's rough.
I was just,
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I just, because I was reading the book, which is another thing, like, which is where another.
I'm just going to remind you that you said this was a good book. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, it was an okay book.
Okay,
book.
I'm here for you.
there was the part, like, there's a part where she, calls to Yemoja when they get to the river to get her to come. And that's the funniest thing, because the thing about the pantheon, the Yoruba pantheon, is that they have Oriki. The Yoruba love their Oriki, which is this praise song, right? And each of the gods have it. Eshu has it, Shango has it, Oya has it, Yemoja has it. So when she starts the singing, the song, the call for Yemoja, there I am like an idiot thinking, oh yes, they're going to use Yemoja's Oriki. And then Yetide Badaki starts to speak. And I'm like, firstly, what is that accent? Secondly, what is that prayer? What is that? Like, why are you not using Oriki? But no, like, oh Lord. Now that I think about it, I think that audiobook was just a terrible experience. I probably would not have been so pissed if it had been
read it in
Kindle.
print. In text. Yeah.
But here is where but here is what, like, really, like, where I'm like, would I have actually still preferred it in text? Because in text, there is no internet. And that's another thing, like, it's so annoying because of the way in which publishing is so centralized. Like, you can always tell that publishing is very white supremacist leaning, because they don't
leaning. They're there, honey. Go ahead. Go ahead.
It's so centered around white supremacy. Because I'm like, nah, they're not leaning the right. They're so centered around it that even when they're writing Yoruba, they can't even be bothered to put the right intonation marks. So I'm certain that if I read that book, I'll just be like, so this OKO, what is she talking about? Is she talking about the car? Is she talking about the god? Is she talking about the husband? Is she talking about the farming equipment? Because, like, OKO can be any of those things, depending on the mark you put on it. And I'm just like, maybe. It's just...
I think this really brings in Claire's point about how we really need to critique these systems, because there is no way they didn't have the resources to find someone, even in their own state. Right. I mean, yes. I think this came out, wherever it came out, they have the resources to find someone living in their own country, but also people do remote work. So it doesn't really matter about the location, but regardless.
And the publishers can afford it.
Yeah, like just to pay someone to look at the Yoruba.
Look at it and translate and be like, okay, this is does this sentence actually mean what the sentence is meant to mean? Where should we put the mark? Can you just translate this for us? We'll pay you this one-time fee for you to do this job. Because this book sold well. They could have done that. Oh Lord.
Oh, but the question I wanted to ask you, have you read the Inheritance trilogy by N.K. Jemisin?
No, I haven't.
I have it though. You have it.
I sent it to me as a present. Thank you. I have it.
Chloe's such a sweetheart. Chloe, we love you.
We love you. Okay. Yeah, I can't bend this finger because I broke it in July and I can't bend it, but still, I'm trying to.
But I asked because I think, especially with the first book in particular, to me, it was an example of a Black writer, a Black US writer who did a fantasy, created a kind of pantheon for the mythology that she's working with. Completely new, right? But I thought some of the way the gods interacted, it reminded me of the dynamics that I'd heard about, that I'd read about elsewhere. They engaged and interacted, and the kind of relationships that they had reminded me of it, without her just, this is Orisha. Like she mixed in a lot of other elements, and like there was no reference to it. Like there was nothing about the naming or anything. It was just these kind of certain personalities that she brought into how they. And sometimes I wish more authors would go in that direction.
Do that.
Not everybody have to be doing Orisha. Like you can go further in the way how you imagine your story, that still like pulls and connects to your culture and will like make those references without having to be so, having to fall into the trap of, oh, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to represent them, and then don't really have the resources necessarily, or maybe the capacity at that time to really execute it in a way that would be the best that the book can be. And it's the same thing with when you were talking earlier about diaspora who wants to connect with home. I think sometimes that they have never been there and they haven't visited. And sometimes I think, well, maybe don't set your book there then. If it's a place that you haven't been to, but there are different ways that you can capture it, because at this point, it's not tied to a physical location. Like at this point, I mean, Jamaica has like over a century of migration to the US. Like the diaspora outnumbers the local population. But it's still that's still part of Jamaica too. There are ways that you can, like I read Black Cake, and for me, like the critique of that book was that I felt like there was more of Jamaica in the fruitcake and how she wrote about the fruitcake as a symbol and whatever than in the actual location, in the scenes where she actually physically located the book. Like I felt it was better captured in the food. So I think they also have, I mean, others had different takes on it, but that was my take. So I thought like you kind of also like be more imaginative and expansive and open to the different ways that you can write this part of yourself into the book without necessarily having to do like a one-to-one.
Yes, I agree, actually. I agree. And I think that like it's just sometimes I wonder if maybe it's still marketing insisting on the stories being told a certain way, kind of like what
I'm sure.
mentioned,
yeah,
right? So
Children
like,
of Blood and Bone did Orisha, so everybody has to do Orisha.
So everybody has to do Orisha, and of course. Oh, but why don't you do something else? No, like other than Children of Blood and Bone doing Orisha and Tommy making like being successful off of the books. You also have to consider the fact that these are pantheons that people already know that they want to know more about, and so therefore they will pick up our book because you explore them in depthly. Like I can just imagine, because like marketing in itself is a scourge, and I say this as somebody that works in advertising, because I know this is what I do for a living, and I'm just like, it's such a scourge, because I'm like, it's everything is just about how do you manipulate like people, readers, to pick up the book, which is the reason why for like initially I was like own voices, and then of course publishing firm tried to monetize it in a way, and I'm like, we see what you all are doing, and it's the same thing with this. It's sad. But the next question I had, and I wish I'd asked this before Claire left. But I guess I can still talk about it. It's about how much of an adaptation of Little Mermaid do we think this book is? Not an adaptation, a retelling of Little Mermaid. Do we think Skin of the Deep is? Yeah, because interestingly enough, I said Skin of the Deep, sorry, Skin of the Sea. The second book is Soul of the Deep. Because interestingly enough, I had actually had no idea. It wasn't until I got to the author's note at the end of the book that she mentioned the Little Mermaid. Because I was reading the book and I'm like, I see elements of the Little Mermaid in this, right? Not of course she rewrote it because Simidele is not going to be all like, oh my God, I love a man, I love a boy, I'm so deaf, I'm going to give up my legs, yada, yada, yada. No, but... Sorry, I enjoyed the Little Mermaid, but sometimes I was like, girl, it's clear that you're not going to black.
Yeah, I imprinted
because what
on
in
that
the nonsense?
Little Mermaid. I love that. I knew I probably still know the whole script. Like when I was a little girl, that was my first VHS. That and a black and white silent film of version of Phantom of the Opera. But like, yeah, like I knew that script, like, yeah, Little Mermaid. So she did a retelling of, was it like the Disney version or the Hans Christian Andersen? Oh, okay.
Yes. So so there's the established shot of the boy sinking into the ocean and she rescuing him, and of course he's a prince. And I know I've said a lot of, I won't say negative, but some critical things about it. But I do think that I like the fact that and it's little things like this that I'm like, Natasha Bowen did pay attention to detail. I just wish her publisher had helped her so that she could have taken it a step further, because the naming of the characters were spot on, like with regards who they were, right? So I could see Zimidele as, a character because Yemoja did see her home. In fact, that is how she became a mermaid. Adekola makes sense because, like, Adekola, those kind of names are names that you use for royalty. So even before it was revealed that it was the son of the chief and the head of the village, you already could tell, like, if you knew Yoruba from the name Adekola, you're like, oh, this is a prince. And, so like little things like that, I'm like, I appreciate that she did that. I just wish you're taking it a step further. But, so like the connection to Little Mermaid, her saving the prince, but, little differences. It's not a love at first sight, is the fact that her saving him means that she's doomed everybody else. And this is, of course, tied to Claire talking about, the patriarchal undertones and the colonialist undertones in the story, because why was the man giving such prominence and his needs and his wants, and the way he even came in was demanding things from Yemoja, and I'm like, boy, if you don't shut your mouth, that is a goddess. I'm like, that is a goddess. If you do not shut, and one of the first of her kind, if you do not shut your mouth, so she has to basically get certain rings in order to appeal to Olodumare so that he does not punish and basically eradicate the Mami Water as punishment for her saving, because apparently her role is not to actually save human beings. Her role is to just rescue, like capture the souls of those who die in the sea, bless them, say Yemoja's prayers, so that their spirits can then move on to Olodumare, right? So she's more of, basically helping their souls transition. But then she sees this boy who she initially approaches thinking is dead so she can retrieve his soul, only to find out that he's alive, and then she rescues him. And so I really like that part. And then I guess for me, the parts I enjoyed were the parts separate from the story, from the Little Mermaid, that Natasha Bowen makes her own. Maybe because I know I've read The Little Mermaid so many times and I've watched the show. So, the part where Yemoja is telling her, do not fall in love with a human. The sea and land cannot mix. If you fall in love with this human boy, you will turn to foam. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. Can you please take me back to the really cool thing of her trying to get rings so that she can contact Olodumare? So I think that for me, it was like, I saw it, like, I had no idea that it was Little Mermaid. But I was just like, there are so many different, like, little elements that were there. And, the sea creatures and everything else. And Chloe, this is where, Claire had mentioned that there's a connection, and I mentioned that there's a connection because, I mentioned I was going to explain why. So because the Mami Water are created by Yemoja, it is to be expected that they have a bit of a power. And because Yemoja is, the queen of, marine life, the mother of the ocean, the mother of the seas, mother of rivers, mother of the fishes and all of that, then it means that all sea-like creatures answer to her as the goddess that she is and the mother that she is. And because the Mami Water were created by her and she does imbue some of her powers in them, so therefore, when, Zimidele is commanding the sharks, for example, she's commanding them with Yemoja's authority, which is why they listen to her. But sometimes, like, it has to be when she, like, has that trust and that belief and all of that, because sometimes some of the sharks disobey. But if she puts in enough force with stopping them, they would listen because she's speaking with Yemoja's authority. And it's not just the sharks. For example, there was this ancient serpentine fish-like creature that almost nabbed Kola when they were on their way to his village to go, retrieve the rings from the Babalawo. And she speaks to him. Like, initially she tries to kill the creature, which can be killed. the creature is as ancient and old as anything else, but then she realizes that she can command him. So like it occurs to her to command him, and she does, and he listens. And this is tied back to the command to the fishes, because like I stated, like she does have like Yemoja's powers based off of the fact that she is a man water. So I'm just trying to bring it all together so that to give clarity on that, so I can answer that part of Chloe's question. So I think the segue for me was that, what do we think about this representation with regards Black fantasy stories, and basically owning these narratives that have just okay, Kiki. We're going to make it fast because oh my god, we've been talking for almost an hour and a half. Okay, this is fun. But I'm going to wrap it up because this is going to be my second to the last question, which is about this whole bringing in of Black fantasy elements and owning the stories. Because what I was thinking about, for example, was when it was revealed that Chloe is going to be not our Chloe.
Oh, okay. I was like, is she in it? Oh.
Not
tell
Chloe,
me.
but Chloe Bailey is going to be like, Ariel. And then when they released the first trailer, and, you had all them racism. The racists were racism because they were all like, oh my God, she's a mermaid. How is she Black? And I'm like, bitch, the fuck? Like, you all think
they are
only
so weird. They're so weird.
Weird. It was so weird. But like, what do we think about this collective reclaiming of, these fantastical creatures? Because like, not only were there Black mermaids in this book, but she also had Black fairies in it. Like
she also had fairies. Black what?
Fairies.
Oh, fairies. Okay.
Yes, they were right there. And I was just like, oh my God, she ran fairies. And I love them. They're adorable. They're cool. But the way in which they've always been depicted have also been very, very white. And I'm like, of course there will be fairies in this world. Like, why wouldn't there be? And it just had me thinking about, this push by writers, to reclaim this part, these stories, to make them less white centric, because like they exist. And I was wondering, are there like mythological creatures that you would actually love to see, like a Black author tackle that has been predominantly white? Right. So like, so far, maybe in books or movies or shows, they've always had them predominantly white. And you're like, no, you would like to see a Black author tackle this and actually have them be, Black or brown. Sure. That's my penultimate question.
Interesting.
I know, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the fairies element in Skin of the Sea, that's kind of cool actually. And I can see younger readers kind of going like, whoa, what? Because that really isn't in books or in visual media at all. I think the only other place I've seen that is, of course, by like Black artists online, like on TikTok and stuff. And they'll do stuff like that, but that's the only space I think I've seen it. And I definitely love it. I think sometimes my only potential, not issue or just something to look out for, perhaps is a better way to put it, is that when we take these elements from other stories or characters or whatever from other stories, and they're like, oh, well, we want to see how that would work if they were Black or whatever different other kind of race, is to actually really fully explore what that is, rather than just change the color and have the story operate in exactly the same way. I'm thinking of, in particular, like the Wheel of Time, Netflix. Was it Netflix? It was Amazon.
No, Amazon.
Amazon.
It was Amazon.
Right. And I remember being kind of frustrated in the first few episodes because and Wheel of Time is a is a universe, according to what the fans tell me, where there are actual, like, real characters who are from different cultures and who are Black and brown and whatever. So it's not like a change to have that. But they did change some of the characters, I guess, that were white in the main quartet or whatever, quintet, whatever it is.
Okay.
And I remember being frustrated because I was seeing all these Black and brown folk in what was still a very kind of medieval European setting. And not that Black folks weren't there in medieval European times, but like it just seemed as if they had no, like it just didn't have any impact. It was just that they were Black and brown. And I remember being like, this feels weird. Because in the cultures that you're pulling from, like these folks would have been from specific places.
Yes.
And so come with a specific way of doing things and making things and saying, you know, and it's not,
and it will be markedly different from, because they're like from a totally different culture. People.
Right. So even if they're like, say, second gen or first gen, I just like there would be some kind of, I just expect something. And it doesn't have to be the real world thing just in 1-to-1, but I would just expect, you know, like you're making it multicultural, but it's still just like one monoculture with lots of other people in it. And I remember being a little frustrated with that. I still haven't finished Rings of Power. I don't know what I'm waiting on as a Tolkien nerd. I think I took a break from all of the discourse around it because people had just many fucking opinions.
People had thoughts. And I never actually started. I've not started it yet. I've not started.
Did you not do a video on it? Did I make that up?
No, I'm not. No. I did the video I did was for Netflix. Sandman.
Oh, no, you're right. Yeah.
I've not actually started Ring of Power because people were saying so many things, and I'm like, I'm going to step away from this so that you all don't color my experience.
I just took a step back because it was too much, and it felt like every episode was super loaded. When I was like, it didn't have to be because I don't feel like. So I'll see how that goes. But I think that's my answer. I think I'm just to make it thoughtful, just to have a really thoughtful approach, and be imaginative with it. Sometimes I just feel like it's just not, they don't go as far as they could with it for whatever reason. And I think it can, sometimes the changes that come out of it can be really rich. You know,
exactly,
and really shift your perspective, and it can really work out. So I think that's what I'd say.
I think mine is actually kind of connected to yours, but mine would be more of, you know, a Nigerian boarding school of magic. And yes, I know J.K. Turfling has, you know, made everybody convinced
poisoned it so well.
You know, has made everybody think that there's only one. Like when people say school of magic, they immediately already think, even though
and she didn't start it by any means.
Like she didn't start it. Like Neil Gaiman had written, Ursula Le Guin had written, like so many people had written, like magic. And also,
I've read so many Nigerian novels that feature boarding schools. Like the boarding school culture seems very strong there. Even with She Called Me Woman, and that's a nonfiction anthology. And there were stories.
I have that. One of my
so like it's very strong there.
That
makes
strong
sense to me. Yeah.
It is so strong. And like, you know, it was tiring because, you know, you mentioned the fact that you would like it to be like not just change the color, but like actually immerse it. And like Nigerian boarding schools have their own tradition. Like if you're writing a Nigerian boarding school with magic in it, and then because like your regular non-magic school already have all these magical creatures that people talk about, you know, to scare, you know, younger students. So like, imagine if you had like a Nigerian boarding school and you had like Madame Koi Koi, who the minute you hear the sound of her heels, you run because that means she's about to come and beat a child bloody, black and bloody for being out of bed. You know, like, I'm just like, it would be a cool horror, magical boarding school, and they will have more sense than Harry and his kid and his friends. And I'm just like, it's going to be great. It's like, I want somebody to write it.
That sounds amazing, actually. Yeah. As someone who went to a boarding school out here, like, I found the stories super fascinating, especially in She Called Me Woman. Like, those were some of my favorites. Because it was it was actually really very different, I found, than my own boarding school experience, which was interesting considering we had been colonized by the same
by the same people.
But it was very, very distinct every time. But yeah, it was very distinct. So that would actually be pretty fucking amazing. And we could just like have that overtake whatever that HP thing is.
It's going to be cool. I'm telling you, I'm waiting. If like after like another 2 years, 3 years, nobody's writing it, I'm going to write that damn story myself. Because I'm like, you know what? If you're not going to write it, I am going to write it so I can read it. So I can be like, this is it. Because there's so many stories. The students that basically takes her head off to plait her hair. And so when you ask her to plait your hair, like she's always like, I'm telling you, like, it should be
I love that
horror series, full-on horror series. Or the one where they're like, oh, when you're reading at night in the library, don't drop your pen, because if you drop your pen, then you'll find like all the heads dancing by your feet, and then they will drag you. Like, I swear, like Nigerian boarding schools, they have this fucking ass stories. I'm just like, whose mind comes up with this? You all are fucking weird.
Boarding schools are weird environments, period. So
and they're breeding grounds for great creepy ideas. So I actually might just write it if nobody writes it. But like, that is one thing I was like, I would love to see. And I think the only last question I have, it's something that maybe Claire, because I was like, oh, final impressions of the book, but like you haven't read it yet, and Chloe hasn't finished it. So I guess I would just say that, because when we started this, you asked me what my thoughts were, and I was like, I thought it was good, but then I was like, I think it was okay. I think that because I like to support Black debut authors, so I always give them a slightly like that grace that I would not give anybody else, because I'm like, nah. But I always give them that grace, which is the reason why. I think that the romance element in it was not necessary and was not needed. I think it read like she was writing the romance because it is expected in a YA novel. Like, oh, YA novels must always have romance, and so therefore I would have her fall in love with Collar, even though,
and I mean, ace people exist, folks. Like, you don't.
They exist, but I'm guessing that for that threat of I will turn you to foam. If like you would turn to foam, I guess because she was like, she wanted to keep it connected
that
to
element,
the Little Mermaid fairy tale, that element of the fairy tale, and so therefore she was doing, because I felt it was unnecessary. I was clear in that I felt that the romance was very rushed. It wasn't believable. I didn't really feel their connection or their sparks. I was just like, please tell me you're not going to fall for this boy. And sure enough, she was like, his brown skin, his lovely hair, and I'm like, what is this?
This sound like the sand-colored man that was in some, what was it called? I don't remember. Let me not. We're streaming live. Let me leave that alone. Go ahead. Let me not slander nobody book at the end. The meeting.
Yeah, I think so. I actually did like their fight with Issue. I like the fact that they brought some elements of it. I'm still kind of like miffed that they made him the villain of the story. But I'm like, well, I did enjoy like I said, I enjoyed the fight. I enjoyed, there was a trickery. There were things about like, she worked. I'm trying to say this in a way that does not spoil the story, so that you might eventually still read it. But the way in which she tricks him, I feel, was in line and like suited to who he is as a god. And I could see it working. Okay. So I was like, oh, okay. So she was able to retain that, and that was really cool. So I actually I think it was an okay read. If I was to give it like a star rating, I probably would give it like a 3.5.
Oh, that's not bad. I mean,
and that is me being generous, because that's audiobook narration, I'm just going to be like mentally tell myself that you're
Different
not
rating for the audiobook. Different rating for the audio.
different rating for the audiobook. Like audiobook, I'll be like, you get away from me. But the story itself, it was the plot was pretty, YA-esque. Like Claire mentioned, it's clearly the hero's journey. You could tell where this was going and elements and all of that. I did appreciate the fact that she tried to bring in as much of the pantheon, the Yoruba pantheon, as she could, and even the ones she didn't bring in, she was able to mention them, so we saw we saw Shango, we of course saw Yemoja, we saw Ishu, of course she's mentioning Ludu Marishi, we see Olokun, she mentions Obatala. So I'm like, she did bring in, people, and I think that if anything, I would consider this as possibly whetting the interest of those that might not be as aware of the pantheon, who might then be like, oh, they want to know more about this. So that is also something that helped the rating for me, because I'm like, I want more people to be interested in Yoruba gods because they're really cool and they don't get enough love as far as I'm concerned. At least as far as general mythology is concerned, they don't get enough love. Yeah. But yeah, I think that this is an hour 45 minutes.
It was a good talk, though. It was a good talk.
I think it was fun. Thank you. I'm glad, the book. I'm glad we actually had a great conversation about the book. And thank you so much for joining us, Kiki. And thank you, Chloe. Enjoy. I hope you feel better soon. And thanks, Claire. I don't know if you're going to see this later on Jerry's channel. But thanks, Claire. Thank you, everybody. For those that are watching, and whether now or they're going to come back and watch, I do hope you read great books. I hope you have a great week ahead. And thank you. Chloe's like that host, Noria. Thank you.
Cheers to you. Good way to end the year.
Thank you. It's a great way to end the year. Okay, so I think that's about it. I'm trying to see how. And Jerry, I don't know if you're still. Let me just see if I can just message Jerry so she could end the live, because I don't think I can. Can we end the live again? I don't think so.
Probably